It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, October 30th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that thinks there's a lot the Flyers can learn from that loss to the Ducks to take into tonight's game against Carolina.
For sure.
We will get into that, plus have our Nemesis of the week all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at @rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. As a show, we are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Blue Sky. We are there. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can subscribe to our show or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, that was a tough loss on Saturday against the Anaheim Ducks. It was the first home loss of the season, so that was kind of a bummer. I'm sure Mermaid Gritty was pretty sad about it. But I think, obviously, when you look at this game, I think that the microscope gets pointed a little bit at Sam Ersson on this one.
A little bit, but John made sure to deflect some of that. There's a couple things. There's like a cause and effect thing here. The first one is the goalie usage that we talked about. It's unfair to just throw him in there at this kind of schedule. And he already said he's going to load up Carter Hart with games. So I'm fearing he's going to play 60 games this year, which I don't think Carter Hart should. But that seems like that's what the plan is. The second thing is, Sam, when Carter Hart was the backup like 3 or 4 games ago, he could have been the backup for this one. So Felix Sandstrom could have gone in the game. But John doesn't want to have anything to do with Felix Sandstrom. It's pretty obvious. He didn't even mention his name after Charlie O'Connor mentioned Felix Sandstrom as a whole with the group in the post game, right? So we know Felix Sandstrom is now not going to play, and you feel bad. Like Ersson shouldn't have been left in for all those goals. But I understand giving Carter Hart the day off. That's why he shouldn't have just been on the bench at all.
Yeah, I think that is a really important point to make because a lot of times goalie changes are made for momentum swings.
Right.
And, it's not entirely the fault of the goalie. And when you don't really have the opportunity to do that because you want to rest your number one goalie, I think that becomes an issue. And I'm sure in the back of their heads, they're thinking, oh, we don't have a few days off. We just have one day off before our next game. So we really and it's against a top team. So we literally can't put Carter Hart in. And then what's the point of a backup at that point?
Right. And that's almost what John said. Like, hey, Ersson's going to have to figure it out. And it's like, okay, I get it. But he's a young goalie. Like, you decided he's your backup, which is fine. We all agree Carter Hart's the number one. But now as far as dealing with this mental part, I don't know. It's not easy.
Yeah. And as we saw with Sam Ersson in his time with the Phantoms, he needs to play well, but you can't overplay him like the Phantoms did. And I think that's, it's similar to Carter Hart. And
there's no danger of him getting overplayed here. That's the good news.
And in the next segment, when we talk about the Carolina Hurricanes, we can see a different goaltending approach, but we'll get to that a little bit later because I do want to talk about the nature of comebacks with the Flyers, because I think that in this case, obviously we all know the Flyers have afternoon hangover issues with their afternoon games. It's always been a thing. It's still a thing. But when this Flyers team attempts a comeback, and they did, and I think there was a lot to it there and a lot of good to take from that. They have to be complete efforts. You can't just score goals. You also have to tighten up defensively. And I think that was the part that was missing here, that it wasn't a complete comeback effort.
Right. So there's a couple things. The first one is when real life and analytics go divergent. So analytics say, hey, the Tippett line had 20 chances. They outchanced the hell out of the Anaheim Ducks. That's great. This is like what we're all expecting. Like, I'm expecting to make
Mhm.
more money next month, but I might not, right? But the reality of the way this game kind of started, there was the sleepiness. But why was there the sleepiness? Because Anaheim was really fast. So Anaheim, I feel like, forced them into those turnovers. But John looked at it like, hey, we had a good start because without those turnovers, look at the analytics. And it's like, yeah, I get it. But that wasn't the result. Now, what you're talking about, the comeback was, I feel like Travis Konecny put too much on his shoulders with that because he knows he's the best goal scorer. He started getting them to come back. And then when he had that turnover and he had 2-goal game, then the turnover now became a bigger thing to him than his 2-goal game. And you almost feel bad. And that's a product of the John Tortorella system. Like, listen, there's no joy here. If you don't win, you can't talk about your 2 goals. You can't even talk about having a good game because the team lost, right? And I feel like there is this ultimate pressure on them, a lot more than a lot of other teams get put on them. And the other thing is that John talked about, that we did talk about after as some of the media. When did the Flyers become a run and gun team? Because now all of a sudden John's talking about pushing it, and he wants to score as many goals as he can. Maybe he knows his defense isn't that good, but still, it's a change for him as a coach too now.
Yeah, where that diverges from reality, I think, is the fact that we have seen this Flyers team play at a very high level defensively, despite not having the personnel to do it.
Right.
And
Right.
and maybe some of that is like early season honeymoon period stuff that comes down to reality. I get that that happens sometimes in this league, but we've seen them play really strong defensively against the Edmonton Oilers. We saw them play really strong defensively against the Vegas Golden Knights for
True.
huge swaths of that game. And so that's where I'm talking about this complete effort, where I know they had the ability to shut down this Ducks team. I feel like they could have done it, and they didn't. And they were focused too much on the goal scoring side of things and taking those risks. To
Yeah,
your
I agree.
point,
There's no question, but that is an emphasis that the coaches now put on the team, which
mhm,
in his tenure here, and really most of his tenure in the NHL, has never been there. Like, this is all of a sudden like a new thing, and I was like
right.
surprised to hear it.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like there's a middle ground here, and I think that's where, the lessons are to be learned here is that
Right.
if you do fall behind 2-0 or 4-2, like there's a good solid way to attempt a comeback here that isn't entirely focused on one aspect of the puck.
Right, but there's no question they shot themselves in the foot by not having a goalie to bring in. Because again, I know what Sandstrom can
Yeah.
do, and when they were down by 2, would have been a good time to bring him in, and I think they would have gotten a better effort. I do, and it's not because Ursan had a horrible effort. It's just there were times where he was just, he was a little bit shell shocked, like he was.
Yeah, and I think another big part of that was the cloud hanging over the penalty kill because the penalty
Yes,
kill has been such a tremendous part of the Flyers' success this early season, and to have it fail like this, and they also had a shorthanded goal against in this game
yes.
as well. So like just some special teams failures
Nightmares
here.
on Broad Street, like that's what it
Mm,
was. I mean, those things were failing. And again, like, there are some very high skill players on Anaheim. We talked about them. Vetrano gets a hat trick.
I
He's
know.
Which is odd, but he started off hot. But Leo Carlson did play and he looked really good. Cam Fowler made that one play. It was just spectacular. And he's been in
Yeah.
the league forever, right? So, they
Yeah.
have some really talented guys, Zegers too, even though Zegers doesn't back check. He's offensively
That is
gifted.
also true.
I know, but he's offensively gifted. And so, there I feel like the Flyers lost track at times of some of their key guys to watch after him.
Yeah.
McTavish had those 2 assists early. Like, I feel like they didn't put any extra emphasis on any of their players. And I think as a result, some of those players were able to kind of get open because they were just playing their normal system. Like, there was nothing special happening there. No special
Right.
adjustment.
Yeah, and that's something, we talked about that last week about adjustments specifically to be able to adjust in game or pre-game to look at the team you're playing and see what you have to do. And yeah, I really think there's a lot of important knowledge the Flyers can take away from this because you can see very specifically what went wrong here, and I think it's something that's fixable. I don't think this is
No,
like a
it's
disaster
fixable.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's fixable.
I don't see this as a disaster game at all. I see it as a game they can learn lessons from, and I see it as, every team has one of these games every so often. It just happens.
Yeah,
And so
there was something else interesting that happened. So post game, I spoke to Frank Vetrano, and remember there was the goal that was going into the break was being reviewed. Now
right.
early, I had noticed Vetrano put his hand up right away, like, "Hey, it's a goal," but no call of goal on the ice. And then I tweeted, "Hey, they're looking at this. It could be a goal, right?" Well, what Vetrano said after the game was he didn't see the puck go in, but based on the way Urson acted, he knew it was a goal, and that's why he put it up. Now, the thing that he said after was even more stunning because you don't hear players say this. He said, "Had I poked at it again, they would have called goaltender interference on me, so I couldn't do that." See, now that's
Wow.
interesting because the goaltender interference is so in a player's head now that even just to try and get a poke on a puck to get it in just on a second try, they're going to be afraid to do that now. And I thought that was like, wow, that's a real awareness there by him, but also a little bit of an indictment on the rule, too.
Yeah. Yeah, that is fascinating. All right. Well, hopefully the Flyers are going to take some lessons learned and apply them in tonight's matchup against the Carolina Hurricanes. And we are going to talk about those Canes coming up next. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer deals on last minute tickets, and with their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting excited for all the fun you'll have. My favorite part of the Game Time app is it's great for getting notified about those last minute tickets and flash deals. Plus, you can get that all important view from your seats. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find that last minute seat. Also, tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code Locked On NHL. That's all one word for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The Flyers have a big week ahead, and we'll be talking about it on the show this week. Of course, we've got Carolina tonight. We've got a home and home with the Buffalo Sabres and a game against the LA Kings this upcoming weekend. And so lots and lots of Flyers action to talk about on the show, and we'll be doing it every weekday. Speaking of those Carolina Hurricanes, a little bit of good timing for him, bad timing for us. But Svechnikov had been out, but he did play in the last game for Carolina. They put him on the fourth line to ease him back in with minutes and action. But my supposition is that he will be seeing more ice time tonight against the Flyers.
Yeah, no question. He's been hard to handle for the Flyers, no matter which team it's been. He's always given them trouble. So that the funny thing is Carolina's problem is not scoring goals even without Svech. They're
No.
scoring goals. They can't prevent them. And I think it's more at the goaltending than the defense because they have a pretty talented defense, although they're missing some players that we'll talk about. But I think it's more about the goaltending. And honestly, I don't know who's going to be in. It could be Ronta, it could be Kochetkov. I don't know who it's going to be.
Carolina's had a couple of injuries. Brett Pesce is out, and Suzuki has been day to day. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think that Carolina has had a mixed bag to start the season, but I think they're trending in the right direction right now.
Yeah, I think ultimately they are. I always feel like Flyers fans are always conflicted when Brendan Moore comes in because they loved him as a player here. They still, when his coaching thing was up in the air a couple of years ago, his contract, they still wanted him back. He stayed there, and he seems like the antithesis of John Tortorella. Like I don't think those two get along. I don't know that for sure, but I just feel like their coaching styles are completely different, and I've seen them sort of like get sparky with each other, like some sparks on the bench, just like by things that they do. And certainly, if this game were in Carolina, Tortorella would hate what they do after. So, but it's not. But I still feel like this is when Brindamore comes here, he's completely at ease. Like for all the talk that Flyers want to be hard to play against, whatever, doesn't bother Brindamore at all. It doesn't seem to bother his teams.
No, that is definitely true. Carolina's won their last 2 games. They're 5-4 right now, so as you can see, they are trending in the right direction, like I said. I think, as we've known from the past, they continue to be pretty dangerous on the power play, 23.1%
Yeah,
this season so far. Their PK is really bad, though. So I think that this is somewhere maybe the Flyers can take advantage of. But again, with the early season stats, you're seeing like the Flyers and Canes have similar shooting percentages right now. The Flyers actually
yeah,
have a higher high danger chances %, higher scoring chances percent overall. But so I do think that there is opportunity for the Flyers here. They just again have to take those lessons we just talked about with the Ducks game and not letting up defensively when you're trying to score those goals. And they could have a good opportunity here for a win.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this would be a good game to play. That guy Morgan Frost, but probably he won't be in there. Um, Another thing, though, again, and I think this has showed really a lot last game was you could tell Tippett was trying too hard. He could barely handle the puck in the offensive zone. Then he got off one great shot, which was terrific, and he did. I think he got an assist in the game. But again, you're not having Owen Tippett to be a playmaker. You really have to get goals out of him, and it's hard for him to get goals on the third line. And I think he's trying too hard now because when he was getting top line minutes or whatever, he was out on the ice a lot, and I don't think he had to think as much. But now his minutes are cut down, and you see the goal, portion of it is cut down. And again, Scott Lawton at center, it hurts his offense. Noah Cates at
Yep.
center, it hurts his offense. Like that's just these are facts. And I think there is a better Flyers lineup out there, but I don't think the coach sees it.
Yeah, I don't think he'll see it until he tries it, and it's just getting him to try it. That's
Right.
an issue,
That's
and that's
true.
gonna be tough against this Carolina team. I mean, they have a pretty stacked lineup here,
It
especially on
is.
the forward side of things. I mean, honestly, especially if Svechnikov moves up in
Yeah.
the lineup and they knock some like, that's gonna be real tough.
Yeah, Aho always
Obviously.
gives him trouble. Like they have a lot of skill guys. Defensively, Burns is there, who's great,
Yep.
and so they're really good everywhere. I don't know if D'Angelo will draw in. I'm going to say probably
No,
not.
we'll see. There it's fraught. The issue is fraught, so we will see what happens there. But still, like Brady Shea's like a solid
Oh yeah,
defenseman
he's
there
always
as
physical
well.
against the Flyers. Always
Yep.
physical.
Yeah, and obviously we know how good Slavin is as
Yes.
well. So I think that the matchups are going to be tough, and that's what's going to be important about the Flyers having last change here because getting those matchups are going to be key, and figuring out how to manage Travis Sanheim's minutes appropriately when you have like 3 really good lines because we've been talking about they've kind of been overdoing it a little bit with his minutes.
Well, you saw it on
Um,
the turnover.
yeah,
That's when you keep throwing the guy out there. Again, I don't want to say he's not Ivan Provorov because he could turn into that, but you have to ease him into it. And it's like he's getting a
yeah.
lot of shifts early, and there's mental mistakes to be made, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so that's where I think that, I'm gonna try and keep an eye on Sandheim's usage and
Right.
when they choose to put him out here. They've gotta be very particular about that, I think. The other interesting thing about this matchup is, just zone time, because I think that's something that the Flyers need to work on a little bit as far as, like, puck management and possession time, because right now they're sort of sliding a little bit back overall in the league in terms of how much time they're spending in the offensive zone versus the defensive zone. And you can see it like with Carolina, they're in the offensive zone like 48.3% of the time right now. And
Yeah.
in the defensive zone, 33.6. That's a huge
That's a
difference
winning
there.
formula, actually. It is. With the Flyers, it's funny because, they have a goal now. They want to outshoot everybody. Okay, that's great. But those follow up shots just aren't there.
Right.
I still don't see them doing much of a set cycle. Like all of a sudden, they throw the puck in the corner, they slow things down, they get someone in front of the net, they work it out of the corner, they get it maybe to the left side and then pass it. I don't see a lot of that. I don't even know if that's in their game plan anymore.
Right, and that's where it comes out in the wash where they're not getting those second, third chances, and you look at the Flyer zone time, it's 41.2% in the offensive zone and 41%, so only a 0.2% difference
Yeah.
between offensive and defensive zone, and I think you're not gonna get those chances if you're not maintaining possession and getting
No,
those
and there's
second and
something
third
else about
chances.
sorry. There's something else about maintaining possession, like, that could be used as a tool to tire the other team out. If all of a sudden, because you're at home, you've got those guys and, their guys have been out there, their defensive group has been out there a little bit longer, maybe like an extra 30 seconds, and you're cycling a puck, you're gonna tire them out. And the more passing you do in the offensive zone, the better chance, if they're tired, that you're gonna get something because they're not gonna be able to defend it. But how often do we see that with this group? That they actually tire out the other team to the point I think I've seen it twice this year.
Yeah, I think that's an important point as well, and like we said, this is all part of a rebuilding team
Right,
learning and young
right.
kids developing, and so none of this is like uh, truly negative. It's just like these are observations that they should
Yep,
be learning from and moving forward
yeah.
and taking that and making adjustments. So hopefully they can do that as well. It is a new week ahead, so we'll have a new Nemesis plus a couple of other notes after this.
Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no There's no B snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit fanduel.com/locked on and get into the action this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Before we get into our nemesis of the week, as we know later this season, if you look at the Flyers calendar, we have on January 6th, I believe it is Ed Snider night. And
Yep.
we just want to know if you have any things that you would like the Flyers to do to honor Ed Snider as the founder of this Flyers team that we all love so dearly. We're going to put a post up on our YouTube channel and you can put your comments there. Things you'd like to see during the game, how you want to honor Ed Snider, any messages you have to the Snider family or to the Flyers to thank or honor Ed Snider.
And we're
We'll
going
get
to take
them.
some of these to the Flyers as,
Yep.
recommendations. So they're going to
Yep.
hear your voice.
Yeah, so make sure if you have strong feelings about that, that you comment on that YouTube post, and we will absolutely get those messages to the team. Talking about our nemesis of the week, last week, my nemesis was like keeping it going. We had seen what happened in terms of off to a strong start, and then things just kind of slid back a little bit. This was before the Vegas game. We talked about having to keep their game elevated, and we saw some of that, and we saw not some of that this past week. So I think, the nemesis for me this week is getting through this busy week with 4 games on the calendar. That's a lot. That's really good ice time management that's going to happen like we talked about with Travis Sanheim, but it goes for the team across the board. It's goaltender management and figuring out what they're going to do there. It's honestly, like you alluded to, Russ, taking another look at the Morgan Frost situation and giving somebody like Tyson Forster or even anybody else a rest when you have a
Right.
4-game week. It's not out of the ordinary to do that, to sit somebody just for maintenance in a game,
No, I
in a
mean, at
week
this
like
point,
this.
Tyson Forster could use a rest, like to sit and look. It would benefit him from the press box. My my nemesis is going to be, what I had sort of briefly mentioned before, like with Travis Konechny. He can't, like, say, yeah, I had a good game, but we lost. Like, nobody's allowed to say they did well with this team right now with the coach unless they win the game. And I kind of feel bad. It almost seems like at times it takes the joy out of it because, you could have a great game going and you might lose the game in the last 30 seconds. That still doesn't mean you shouldn't think like, hey, I'm having a good season. I'm doing more. We know Travis Konechny wants the team to win. That's pretty obvious. But it feels bad. And that's something where it's like, it just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. It's always like a tough situation there. I do want to talk about one other thing this week, and the Flyers honored Zack Hill at the game
Yes.
on Saturday, and you were there. Can you talk about how that was and how Zack was taking it all in?
Yeah, it was great because Zach had been there, I don't know, since the 80s, and not many of the Flyers group left or from the 80s, but everybody came back. Tim Panaccio was back. Everybody
Oh,
was back. It was really nice. I'd seen some people from the Phantoms, from when I used to cover the Phantoms a lot, that nobody really from today's crew would know. So it was very nostalgic. It was amazing the way the Flyers did it. It's always great the way the players show up, their alumni. Zach was one of a kind. Like, I could tell you from doing radio shows, just setting up interviews, he was great. But one time at the draft in Ottawa, myself and somebody else were sitting, and we happened to be sitting like a couple tables away from the Flyers and their prospects, and they invited us over. They paid for the tab. I mean, things like that. Those are things that Zach would do, and always made you feel included. Always made you feel important. Never talked down to you, and he talked about that. And his mother was there. His mother was an anchor woman for like 3 different television stations, and she was actually in the Who Shot JR episode. She had some sort of part in that for Dallas.
oh
So it
my
was,
God.
yeah, I mean, who knew that, right? So you find out more about a person that you've known for like 20 years. And so, the whole thing was just great. I really enjoyed it. The Flyers did a great job in it. I spoke to Dan Hilferty. It was nice. It really was one of those things where, and it was before a game, so it was like really cool. But then you had to get back in game mode. We all were saying it's kind of hard now to get back in game mode, but we did it.
That is so cool. Yeah, it looked really cool from afar, what little we got to see on
Yeah.
the broadcast, but I'm so glad you were able to be there in
Yeah,
person.
me
Yeah,
too.
Zach
I was
Hill.
really thrilled that I was invited, and just, yeah, I would have been, upset if I had missed that.
Yeah, it was just such an illustrious career with the
Yeah.
Flyers for Zach, and I'm glad they
He's won a
gave
Dillman
him.
Award, I mean,
Yeah,
for the best PR staff, rightly so.
yeah, yeah, that is so cool. Before we go, obviously, really sad news out of the Elite League in the UK. Adam Johnson unfortunately passed away from that scary skate injury that happened. And, I remember Adam Johnson playing for Wilkes-Barre Scranton
Yeah.
a lot, watching Phantoms games against
Yes.
them and just seemed like a really cool guy and
He
a
played like
fun
12,
player to
13 NHL
watch.
games, something like that
Yeah, for the
for the
Pens.
Penguins.
So sending our love and regards to his friends and family and teammates. Just such a tough situation, but we are absolutely thinking about him here. That will do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow to recap the game against Carolina that is happening tonight, plus Phantoms Tuesday. They had a couple of games this past weekend. We will talk about then. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got mailbag questions or that Ed Snider night feedback, you can send it in via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on the app formerly known as Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.